Welcome to Channel's Business Globe with me, Juliana Olayinka, from just outside the Palace of Westminster in central London. Coming up on today's show, as Donald Trump's tariffs target car imports, concerns are growing over what this could mean for the UK's automotive sector, especially after Jaguar Land Rover announced it would halt some exports. We'll be hearing from our Downing Street correspondent Simon Pusey, who's been following the reaction from Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And I'll take you to the heart of this year's Commonwealth Trade and Investment Summit, hosted right here in London. With top leaders, including the Governor of Enugu State, in attendance, the event focused on unlocking investment opportunities across Africa's most dynamic markets. I'll be bringing you some key takeaways from the event and my exclusive interviews. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, 2 Labour MPs have been barred from entering Israel after expressing support for Palestinian human rights groups. The Israeli government claims the decision is based on national security concerns, but critics, including those within the Labour Party, say it reflects a growing intolerance towards dissent. The controversy has sparked debate in Westminster, especially after the UK Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch publicly sided with Israel, drawing sharp criticism from opposition MPs and rights campaigners. Elsewhere, the UK government is ramping up efforts to protect its car industry from the fallout of fresh tariffs, with Prime Minister Keir Starmer outlining new measures to support electric vehicle manufacturers and ensure the sector remains globally competitive. The US remains the UK's largest single car export market, with over 100,000 British-made vehicles shipped across the Atlantic last year, valued at more than £3 billion. In response, Starmer's administration has moved on UK car makers. Under the new plan, electric vehicle manufacturers will be given more flexibility to meet mandated sale targets, with penalties for falling short reduced and rules adjusted to allow targets to be averaged out over several years. At the same time, the government has extended the sales window for hybrid cars until 2035, a move designed to ease the transition for both the industry and consumers. Smaller luxury manufacturers such as McLaren and Aston Martin will also be exempt from certain electric vehicle regulations, an attempt to shield high-value, low-volume producers from the burden of rapid compliance. Crucially, Starmer is also backing the plan with a major financial incentive package, including a £2.3 billion consumer tax breaks and investment in EV charging infrastructure. Describing the changes as both pragmatic and necessary, the Prime Minister said the UK must respond decisively to shifting global dynamics.
Jaguar Land Rover, our leading exporter of goods, employing thousands of people across the West Midlands and beyond, including here, that proud symbol of British engineering brilliance. And brilliance is the right word. When you look at what is rolling off here, that is engineering brilliance. It is our industrial heritage, but also, in my strongly held view, it is our industrial future, not just our heritage. My message to you, Rachel, and my message to you today is simple. These are challenging times, but we have chosen to come here because we are going to back you to the hilt. And I think it's really significant that after the announcement on Wednesday, we had Adrian with us at 7 o'clock the next morning, and here we are Monday with you. Please read into that a statement of intent, because it is a statement of intent about how important this is for you, for us, and for the country. As Rachel has said, there's no doubt the challenge, but this is a moment for cool heads. Nobody wins from a trade war. You know that. But it's also a moment for urgency, because we've got to rise together as a nation to the great challenge of our age, and it is the great challenge, which is to renew Britain so that we're secure in this era of global instability. And nobody is pretending that tariffs are good news. You know that better than anyone. 25% tariffs on automotive exports and 10% on other goods. That is a huge challenge for our future, and the global economic consequences could be profound. But this moment has also made something very clear, that this is not a passing phase. And just as we've seen with our national security and defence, particularly over recent months in relation to the war in Ukraine, now with our commerce and trade, this is a changing and completely new world, an era where old assumptions, which we've long taken for granted, simply don't apply any longer. Now, before the election, I called it an age of insecurity. And that is the right phrase, insecurity. Because I know that that's how it's felt in the lives of working people. Insecurity, a care, a worry for builders, for carers, for nurses, factory workers like people here, working harder and harder for the pound in their pocket, yet watching this rising tide of insecurity threaten to sweep away the things that we cherish in our communities. Trust me, I know people will be feeling like that right now. But to those people I say, we have your back. This government will not just sit back and hope. That is how politics has failed you in recent years, sort of attempting to manage crises without fundamental change just leads to managed decline. So no, we're going to seize the possibilities, fight for the future on defence spending, on AI, clean British energy, and on manufacturing, including car building. Make those forces work for Britain, rewire our economy and our state, so that once again they serve the interests of working people. And that is why we're rewiring the state completely, ripping up the regulation that stops it being a force for good, building new homes, new towns, new infrastructure, accelerating the investment that will finally unlock the potential of every community. And let me be really clear at a moment like this. Our future is in our hands. And so, of course, we will keep calm and fight for the best deal with the US. And we've been discussing that intensely over the last few days. But we are also going to work with our key partners to reduce barriers to trade across the globe, to accelerate trade deals with the rest of the world, and champion the cause of free and open trade right across the globe.
Well, for more on how this fits into Labour's wider trade strategy and what it means for British jobs and competitiveness, I was earlier joined by our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, so Lord Mandelson, the UK ambassador to the US, he's hosting a series of high-level talks in Washington this week, of course trying to create some sort of buffer. Still very delicate language, though. No retaliation from the UK, but then how long can this last, right? We're not all traders, but surely the bloodbath we've seen in global markets is going to trickle down to us normal folk if something doesn't happen.
Well, the FTSE index, the UK FTSE, recently had its worst ever day.
Since the pandemic.
But since the pandemic, and so I think you're right. I think the thing that he's looking for, obviously, is a trade deal. Yeah. The UK is looking for a trade deal. This is what we did Brexit for, partly, and that will offload some of the tariffs that are coming our way. We've only got 10% tariffs, which compared to what Donald Trump's putting on the rest of the world is very modest. Yeah. And over the weekend, Sir Keir Starmer said his sort of watchword phrase was "keep calm." We've always heard of "keep calm and carry on." Keep calm and wait for a good deal. You know, keep your cards close to your
because markets do
chest.
react. They overreact sometimes, don't they?
And what we're going to see is we've obviously seen Canada and the EU coming out all guns blazing, taking on Donald Trump. And he loves a conflict, Donald Trump. So he's getting his early conflicts in with Canada, with China, with the EU. If the UK, I think this is the thinking, if the UK can hold back a little bit, Donald Trump's laser focus will not be on the UK. And then with things like the King, things like our soft power, buttering him up, getting him over for a state visit, his second state visit, then we can start to
You're
reap
right,
the
Simon,
benefits
but I
of
said
this.
this to you a couple of weeks ago. To what end? This is unsustainable. There's talks of the global recession. Is everybody, all world leaders, going to be tiptoeing around Donald Trump?
I think you'll see a split when you'll see the Mark Carneys of the world, the Canadian Prime Minister, who will obviously take on Donald Trump. You'll see Denmark do the same with all the Greenland stuff. And then you'll probably see the other part, which is sort of softly try and work with him, try and get in his good books. Because if you go to war with Donald Trump, he relishes that, and he relishes winning and beating you. But I think in terms of a global sense, there's very few people outside the Republican Party or outside the MAGA movement within the US who are saying this is a good policy financially for the world. A lot of people are saying this is unsustainable, and we are seeing a trade war, which generally financiers across the world and economists say is good for no one. We've seen retaliation like for like in China. The EU have not come out and said what they're going to do, but they say they will soon. So I think generally for people this is not going to help. Maybe gas prices, your petrol might be a little bit cheaper soon, but generally everything else you're looking at, prices are going to rise. What Donald Trump and his officials say is that this is a broader thing. This isn't like a short-term thing. This is bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, where they've been shipped out to China before, and this is trying to protect American workers. Well, I think that will be short-term. You will not be seeing much protection for American workers. Prices are going to rise in the US. And there's question marks as to why some places are having tariffs at all. Switzerland have no tariffs on US goods, and they've got tariffs. So
absolutely. You mentioned that 10%, so we should be lucky. It's not as major as China and the EU, but let's talk about cars. 25%. That seems to be a blanket levy. That's affected Jaguar Land Rover. Goodness me, the Jaguar Land Rover, I'm sure a couple are passing as we speak. They said they're no longer going to be exporting into the United States. That's quite serious. That's job losses.
It is, and it'll be interesting to see what other companies do. We've got a big car manufacturing sector here. It's not going to hit quite as hard as places like Mexico and Canada, which had huge trade deals there. But Donald Trump likes to do this, doesn't he? He loves to mix it up. He loves to get involved, and he loves chaos almost, and he loves doing things differently. So I think, but he is kind of pinning everything on this, isn't he? Like, if this fails, if this falls apart, he's got the midterms, which are not too long away. This is such a major thing. He likes to change his mind as well. Let's not forget, and he doesn't mind doing that. So if this doesn't work in a few weeks, we may see him rolling things back. But at the moment, this is such a huge shock to the world economy. And he's placing all bets on this.
It's quite interesting. Just lastly, I was listening to lots of business news this morning before I sat down with you, and the term unprecedented was used constantly. Very much a throwback to 5 years ago when the markets reacted to the COVID lockdowns. Yet there doesn't seem to be hysteria around us. Even though it's unprecedented, billions, trillions are being wiped off the global economy. Nobody seems to care that much. Is that true, or have things changed?
I think it'll take a while for it to impact your ordinary person, right? For prices to rise, that's when people will start to get annoyed when, the cost of living goes up in various places, things to buy, whether, American goods that, or obviously companies are going to feel the pinch here, but it's mainly bigger companies, isn't it? So you've got your CEOs who are worrying, and you've got your Zuckerbergs and people who've lost hundreds of millions of pounds. Yeah, billions of pounds, hundreds of billions of pounds, or dollars. So I think they're the ones being affected at the moment. It might take a while for that to trickle down to the ordinary person, but I think there's no doubt that if he continues with this, ordinary people will see various prices of things skyrocket, because anything they were buying at one point now has a 20% tariff on it.
Absolutely. It's quite frightening. Goodness me. Who knows what the discussion is going to be this time next week, Simon. Thank you so much. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll take you to the heart of this year's Commonwealth Trade and Investment Summit, hosted right here in London. With top leaders, including the Governor of Enugu State, in attendance, the event focused on unlocking investment opportunities across Africa's most dynamic markets. I'll be bringing you some key takeaways from the event and my exclusive interviews. And as always, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from just outside the Palace of Westminster in central London. In a moment, I'll be sharing highlights from this year's Commonwealth Trade and Investment Summit. But until then, here's a breakdown of some of the biggest business news stories of the week. In a strategic pivot from the Pacific, New Zealand earlier this week unveiled plans to double defence spending over the next 8 years. The government will invest around $5.4 billion in weapons systems, personnel and naval upgrades. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon said the increase would bring military expenditure to 2% of GDP, placing the country in alignment with NATO's defence targets. To Energy Now, Shell has revised its Q1 guidance, cutting expected LNG production by around 400,000 metric tonnes. Output is now forecast between 6.4 and 6.8 million metric tonnes, following cyclone-related disruption and unplanned maintenance in Australia. Nevertheless, the oil major's gas trading results remain strong, and it expects Q1 earnings from the division to be consistent with the prior quarter. The International Renewable Energy Agency has reported a record-breaking expansion in renewable power capacity for 2024. The global addition of 585 gigawatts represents a 15% increase from the previous year, with renewables now accounting for over 90% of total power expansion worldwide. This surge underscores the accelerating shift towards sustainable energy sources and highlights the growing commitment of nations to address climate change through substantial investments in renewable infrastructure. And now to my final topic, the Commonwealth Trade and Investment Summit held earlier this week in London. Kicking off with an address titled "A New Commonwealth, Driving Global Trade and Investment," the summit focused on how member nations can collaborate to remove trade barriers and support sustainable growth. A key theme was unlocking investment in emerging cities across the Commonwealth, home to over half of the world's top 20 fastest growing urban centres.
Common markets. Here we are talking about Commonwealth. And we do know that if we're going to have to grow at the scale we're talking about, we need to look at what are the key enablers to be able to work within a common market. And that's what the advantage of a Commonwealth is, because you have a huge opportunity to attract a high impact investment. And that's what we're here to basically pitch the state, to show that anywhere exhibits all the right conditions to nurture the sort of opportunities and development that we talk about, the African opportunity. Here you are talking about specificities. We're talking about specific areas that investors can come and complement what we're doing. And we're also talking about numbers, talking about the huge returns in those areas. So what we do as a state is that when we do not take a passive position about investment, we're very intentional, because we recognize from the onset that the sort of exponential growth that we've projected would only come from private sector investment. So we've deliberately curated and also prepared quite a lot of investment opportunities. So if you look at the spread, we have about 40 high impact growth areas that we have curated for investors. And we've helped de-risk those time it would have taken to do your full feasibility. So what you need to look at is, we've done the market assessments for you, we've done the financial modeling, we've also done all the technical analysis. So all you need to do is your desktop review, and then you come and invest. And that's what we've been able to showcase here. We've been able to demonstrate that we're going to make the process easy for you. The state is safe for you to invest. You are working with trusted partners, and the returns are huge. And that's why we're here.
So today was really important to speak with the Commonwealth. The changing demographic of the world and even our region in West Africa necessitates that we build new relationships, that we consolidate old relationships, and we make sure that investors know exactly what it is. Nigeria is open for business. Mr. President has said that since May of 2023, and we continue to make these trips and also to invite investors to Nigeria to prove the point and to support our private sector. Today we just finished a session with two of our governors speaking to investors here in the UK. Lagos State Government and Enugu State Government. They came here with their deal books, they came here with the priority sectors, and I was able to speak to the room as well to talk about the reforms that the federal government has instituted, and also to say about the next steps where we're going, the priority sectors, and to answer questions about the business climate. So this is the granular work, and we keep tracking. We made the point that investment announcements as at December 2024, $50.8 billion for Mr. President's trips alone, and making sure that we track those investments. So investment announcements are one thing. What we hear in the room is they're asking about the financing packages. They're asking whether they can get sovereign, guarantees. I'm like, no sovereign guarantees. We have de-risked transactions. Our Sovereign Wealth Fund, IFC have de-risked some transactions. The state governors were able to tell them that there are different bouquets of de-risking and PPP options. So it's actually a working meeting, but they're closed doors. But we're able to share the sectors that are priority for Nigeria: mining, construction, infrastructure, services, whether it's our entertainment, our digital trade, hospitality, tourism, education, healthcare, and we have transactions to back this up. So as Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, we support other ministries. We work closely with other ministers. I work closely with the Minister of Health, for instance. There was a diagnostics firm, the largest in the world, saying how can they access the Nigerian market? They need hand-holding. And I said, sure, I'm going to introduce you to my counterpart. So this is how it works, and then you follow through. So it's not just about being here in the UK. It's about those emails that come afterwards, those meetings, inviting them to Nigeria, taking them around the country, and that's basically what the job is. Well, we were with the American ambassador was in my office just last week. We had conversations about where the strategic relationship is going. It's an old relationship. It's not going anywhere down south anytime soon. What it is we continue to watch the situation and engage in consultations. AGOA will be up for renewal or for discussion, negotiation later this year. You know that we're heavily oil and gas exposed in terms of imports into the U.S. We also have our fertilizer, our lead, urea, closely following after that. We've had an announcement, or at least I made a pronouncement for MSMEs and how we're diversifying market access for MSMEs and how to look at markets across the world. But why this is so important is that the global economy is basically overheated by this announcement. You know that Africa and trade in Africa is a bit isolated because we're so small in terms of global trade, which is why AFCFTA is so important for us as a continent, trading within ourselves. But the good side, and that's when you have global recessions and financial crises, is that because we're also a bit out of the fray, we can take a step back and revise things, respond to things, and not react. The global economy can go into a recession if other countries decide and other markets decide to retaliate. So the WTO is watching this very closely. I've been in touch with Madam Director General and just looking at how she'd said it from Davos that we should all just try and keep calm and not overheat the global economy. And so how other countries react or respond in the coming weeks will be very important for the world.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.